Hello everybody, my name is Brenden L, and today I'm going to be showing you how to install Pi-hole and implement it on your home network. Now why would you want to do this on your network? Well, Pi-hole is a network-wide ad blocker that works at the DNS level, so it's going to be able to prevent more ads than other solutions like an ad blocker browser extension, and can even circumvent some of those pages that come up when you're using an ad blocker browser extension that prompt you to disable that extension before you proceed onto their website. On top of this, it works on a myriad of devices, so instead of just working on desktop versions of browsers, it can also work on your mobile devices, your player devices like a Chromecast or a Roku, and anything else that communicates on your network. At this point, you're going to need to get your hands on a Raspberry Pi. Obviously, any Linux machine will really work here, but obviously this is geared towards a Raspberry Pi installation. I'm using a Raspberry Pi 3B Plus for this installation. However, people have shown instances of it running on a Raspberry Pi Zero. Just know that if you run it on anything else than the Raspberry Pi 3B Plus, your mileage may vary on the things that I show here in this video. But you've got your hands on the device that you're going to be running this on, like the Raspberry Pi. You're also going to need to grab an operating system for it. Now, any Linux distro is going to work for this. You can even run it in a Docker package. However, I'm going to be running this on the newest version of Raspbian, which is Buster, and specifically I'm going to be running it on the light image, which is a minimal image. A minimal image means that there is only a command line interface when you run this. There's no desktop interface, and why I recommend that for this installation is that there is no need for a desktop when you're running Pi-hole, whether it be an installation or post-installation. All of the installation is done through the command line, and I'll be doing that through SSH in this video. And then any kind of interfacing after the fact is done through a web interface primarily, or commands in the command line. So there's no need for a desktop, and there is a performance gain if you run an OS without a desktop, and plus you just get the extra benefit of learning Linux command line. After you've gotten your image downloaded, you're going to want to use something like Balena Etcher, which is my preferable etching software, to write that image onto the micro SD card. It's very simple. You'll just select the image, select where you're installing it to. I don't have my SD card plugged in at the moment, and then flash it. It's very simple. Balena makes it very simple, and that's why I prefer that imaging software. Now that we have a Raspberry Pi up and running, we're going to need to enable SSH on it. Now, I'm currently SSH into the Pi, but I want to be able to show you how to enable SSH without being in the Pi in some aspect. So what you'll have to do is connect your Raspberry Pi to a keyboard and monitor and log in using Pi and Raspberry for the default login and password. Then at that point you're going to type in this command, sudo raspi.config. That'll bring a small interface up to here. You'll go down to interfacing options, SSH, and select yes. At that point it'll tell you that it's been enabled. You'll select over to finish. And for a second note, you want to type ifconfig, which stands for interface config, and note the IP address, so that way you can SSH into the Pi. Of course, you could do this all through the monitor and keyboard installation. However, it is much easier to manage your Pi from an SSH installation. We have SSH enabled, and we're in our Pi. What we're going to need to do is run the command sudo apt-get update and sudo apt-get upgrade. What this does is it runs both commands, apt-get update and apt-get upgrade at the same time, and this really just updates your repository and all the packages on your machine up to the latest version. Just make sure you get every installation up to date and the newest version to resolve any bug fixes or issues that may come with it. You really should be running this before any kind of installation on your Linux machines. We've upgraded all the packages on our Pi and rebooted to ensure they take an effect. We can start our Pi-hole installation. Now there's two different ways we can do this. The first way is the command you see I've posted here. This is known as piping in the bash. It automatically runs the script, and this is a little controversial because you can't read the code on your system before it runs, meaning that malicious code could be injected onto your system. So another way that we're going to do it is first we're going to make a directory for the Pi. So we're going to make that directory and cd into it. And then we're going to run this command to download the Pi-hole install script. Now at this point you can use the nano command to look at the code to ensure that everything is above board. But if you're like me, you just want to get this started, you can sudo bash basic install. Sorry, got a little fat fingers there. And then it'll make sure you're a root user, which you can just ensure by running this as sudo, and then the installation will start. After a little bit, you'll be presented with this screen, which is where the prompts start coming in. So first, you'll just click through these, which just warns you what it's going to be doing and asks for a donation. Ask you for a static IP address, and then it'll ask you which DNS provider you want. So there's quite a few options for which DNS provider you want. Obviously, we all know Google is a pretty popular DNS provider. OpenDNS is a service owned by Cisco, and it also includes a built-in phishing filter, and it also includes what's called a OpenDNS family shield, and it blocks things such as malicious content, adds proxies and anonymizers, which can help filter web traffic. However, like this one and a few others down the list, I choose to do ones where it does not do any DNS filtering on its own, as the point of installing the Pi-hole on your server, on your network rather, is to be able to control all the DNS blocking on your network, and I would rather not offload that to some third party. Level 3 doesn't do any DNS filtering on its own. However, if you mistype a URL, it will do a web search for that URL through Level 3's own search engine. Komodo is kind of like OpenDNS. It's not owned by Cisco, but it blocks certain domains, including ones that do have excessive advertising. But again, I do not like these, as I like to control all the DNS options on my own. DNS Watch just offers fast, free, uncensored DNS resolution. Quad9 has their filtered and unfiltered options, which I really like, and will not log any of your IP addresses. And then Cloudflare also does not log your IP addresses, but doesn't do any DNS filtering, and the independent DNS monitor DNS perf ranks them as the fastest DNS service in the world. However, one thing I would recommend you do is ping all of these on your home network, see which one of these provides the fastest response time for you, and select that one, honestly. Because again, like I said, the reason you're installing this is to perform your own DNS filtering, so you don't want to offload that to some third party where you don't know what they're filtering. And for me, this was Cloudflare was the fastest, so we're proceeding forward with that. These are the lists of domains that will be blocked on your Pi-hole network. You can add these back later, or you can remove them later, so I would recommend keeping all of these enabled for the time being, as you can go through later and remove ones later that you decide that you want access to for whatever reason. This is obviously which protocols it'll be blocking over. Obviously I want both. And then it's going to show you what your current IP address is and your current gateway. Now this is important because if your router assigns your Pi a different address later on down the road, this could mess up your Pi-hole installation. So make sure that your router has a reservation for your Pi specifically, which I'll be showing you later when I show you how to configure the router settings. Otherwise, down the road, this could be mismanaged. Most routers nowadays are smart enough to kind of reserve that address for the MAC address of the Pi, but again, for safety's sake, you kind of want to carve out that reservation yourself. And this is just kind of repeating what I just said. You're going to want to manually set the IP address in the router. I'll always recommend to install a web administration interface. It makes messing with your Pi-hole a lot easier. And you'll want to keep the light TPD web service as default, unless for some reason you have another web server running on your Pi and you think you can upload it into that. Yes, you want to log queries, because you can use this later to kind of see what queries are being dropped and which ones are being passed through, and you can use it for any kind of diagnosis. These are the different kinds of privacy modes. So here doesn't really explains it a little bit. So show everything is obviously, it doesn't really hide anything on the web interface. Hiding domains means you won't be able to see what your top domains and top as serving domains are when you look at your Pi later. Hiding domains and clients means you won't be able to see which clients are searching which queries. Anonymous mode anonymizes all that. You want to be able to see what queries are being done on your network, and then you can just disable statistics entirely. Now, I like the show everything feature. It provides you a lot more information about your network, and if you have your own reasons to want to hide domains and clients, so you can pick those if your situation calls for it. After the final configuration steps run on their own, you'll be presented with this screen, which shows the current IP address and some information showing where your install log is, where to access your web interface, and very importantly, your login password. You want to write this down, however, if you forget it, it's pretty simple to reset the password if you can log into your Pi, which I will be showing you. So at this point, you're going to want to reboot the Pi, and then you're going to be able to access the web interface. So we're just going to run the sudo reboot, and then I'll be back with you in a second. So really quickly, I'm going to show you guys how to carve out an address reservation for your Raspberry Pi to make sure it keeps that IP address that it's been assigned, as well as how to set that DNS address to be sent out to every device on your network, so you don't have to manually configure it on every device. So here, this is my home router. For this net year, I go to advanced and I go over to LAN setup. Now you'll notice this is a different IP address than noted earlier. It's because it's a different install of a Pi, and it's assigned a different address because it's on my parents' router, which is where I'm at right now. But concept is still the same, obviously. This is the MAC address of the Pi, and simply would just be clicking the add button, writing down what, like for instance, this is what my desktop is right now. You could even just, if it's in this one, you just click right here and add that to the reservation, so that way that one gets carved out and you don't have to worry about a different device being assigned that address. And then to send out that DNS address to every device on your network, for this router, it's advanced in an internet setup, and then you'll want to go down to domain name server addresses, and instead of automatically getting them from your service provider, you'll want to set up specific ones. Again, this is the address I was using when I had this running on my home network, and then you can have a failover address. So this won't have it to where if your Pi-hole throws out a DNS request, it's going to go to the failover secondary. This is only activated if you can't ping or cannot for some reason reach your primary DNS server at all. So you may want to set, like for instance, Cloudflare's IP is 1.1.1.1. So since I'm already using Cloudflare, if this device isn't reachable, it can automatically go over to that IP, so that way if the Pi goes down, you don't lose that internet connectivity. This does have one downside, however, of setting it through the router, is that on a lot of routers, it hands itself out as the DNS server. So when you look in your internet options, both your gateway and your DNS server will be 192.168.1.1. And so when you're looking at your client page on the Pi-hole web interface, it'll show a lot of queries from your air quotes router when it's really coming from a myriad of different devices. This can be solved one of two ways. One, you can manually configure this on every device. You may also want to do this if you're on a network with a lot of different people and they may not be as tech savvy, and you want to make sure that you want to test it for first, or you're not sure if you're going to be able to diagnose the issues. So on this computer, you'll just go over to here and set it manually 9, and then if you do this, it'll automatically use that as its DNS server, and then that will show my, for instance, this address again is 192.168.1.2, and it'll show that as the client instead of 1.1, which is the router. You can also solve this a secondary way, which is using your Pi-hole as your DHCP server. However, you're going to have to disable the DHCP server on your router. You may not want to do that. That's up to your own discretion. Now that you've set up Pi-hole and you've either configured your router to use your Raspberry Pi as your DNS server or configured your specific client, you can go to pi.hole/admin to access the web interface. After this, just kind of bare at this point, you'll want to click login, and you'll either have to use that password that was assigned when you finish the installation, Or you can simply run the command sudo pi-hole-a-p, and it'll ask you to enter a new password. We can just make it blank for new password, so no password at all. If we click login now, it'll just allow us to go to the admin page directly. Now, I took a little bit of a break to visit some websites to generate some queries, so we could see that I've had a tool to 227 and blocked 38 of them. And now I'm going to go through a little bit of the features of the web interface. So first you can see all the query types and what they were answered by, so you can see which ones were blocked, which ones were sent on to Cloudflare, and which ones were cached, or answered from the cache rather. To see which domains were visited the most. This one is actually my parents' ISP, so that's not really a surprise here. And then top block domains is the advertisement that it looks like Windows 10 has natively. However, I could be wrong there. And then I visited CNN because they're ad heavy. Now going through that, the query log shows you all the queries on your network, making them red if they've been blocked and green if they were forwarded. Pretty obvious. And then they have an option to be able to either block previously permitted domains or vice versa, permit previously blocked domains. Then there's longer term data, so you can look at the specific data. Again, I've only done this today, so I can only look at stuff from today. But if you've had this on your network longer, you can look in the specific date range, so you can kind of see not only what queries were blocked, but overall what queries were visited on your network. So this may be very handy if you have kids and you kind of want to monitor their network traffic. Then we have the whitelist and blacklist, so permitting domains that you want to are otherwise blocked, and blocking domains that are otherwise permitted. After that, we have a feature to disable, so we can disable the ad blocking tendencies and just forward all traffic onto your upstream DNS provider for any amount of time, which is good for debugging. And then a couple tools for Pi-hole, which is updating Gravity, which is their list of block domains, being able to find domains in your block lists, an audit log, which is showing the amount of queries that have been blocked or allowed and allowing you to review them on a amount of hit basis, and then a log that kind of shows the live amount of traffic and what's being blocked, what's being forwarded, etc. And same here, same kind of thing, just specific for FTL. And you can even generate a debug log if you want. This can be useful for debugging and posting it on forums. And then we get into network, which just shows you the different devices that are connected. Right now it's only my PC and the router. You may note that it looks like all the queries are coming from my router. This is part of a issue that is on the network that I'm on. We're using currently a solution that's provided by my ISP, a router modem combo that they use that I cannot get into and change the settings of. So there is something that is configured in the router that is making all the traffic seem like it is coming from that router, and I cannot really explain why that is happening, to be honest. But moving on, we get into settings, which is where the real meat and potatoes of what you can do with Pi-hole is. So first you just get some information about your Pi, what the stats are like in terms of resource consumption and network information, and then some dangerous buttons that will let you kind of debug and restart your Pi from the web interface, so you don't have to physically unplug it or go into the SSH and go to the command line. So then you can add more block lists. So this is very useful. You can add different amounts of either domains or a list of hosts like are shown here. So you can block those as well. A useful site that I like to use for this is firebog.net. They have tons of lists of different kinds of block lists, and you can just copy all these, for instance, paste them, save, and it adds each of those as a different line in the block list. And you can save an update, which I won't do because it'll take up a little bit of time, but you'd want to save an update later. DNS settings, so you can change which upstream provider you do. If you want to add custom ones, change which interface it uses. Obviously there's only really one interface for the Pi in terms of physical. And other settings, if you want to set the DHCP server, on the Pi, so you can get around the issue of making it look like all your traffic is coming from the router and show each individual client instead of having to configure them individually. You can do that in this area. Just a reminder that you will have to disable the DHCP server on your router if you choose to go that route. You can also set API settings and you can exclude certain domains from being shown in your top domains and top clients for privacy reasons if you want, and change just some little settings using different layouts or different temperatures if you are more used to your temperatures being shown in Fahrenheit, for instance. This is that privacy setting that came into the setup, so level 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. You can change that here if you want to. And then this allows you to import settings from a different Pi or export your Pi's settings. So that way you can, if you're going to be reinstalling a different Pi, like a Pi 0, or if you want to give your settings to a friend to use. Finally, we can look at the command line options that allow you to mess with the Pi through the command line and SSH. A lot of them are the same as you saw on the web interface, like these, where it's just whitelist, blacklist, and wildcard domains. Regex, which is regular expressions, and that's just a whole video in and of itself. If you're more interested in that, you can do your own research. The debugging options, like being able to do Pi full tail, which again shows the kind of live update of domains being forwarded, blocked, etc. So you can kind of see how that is done. Useful for tracking down issues with your Pi-hole. You can run the Pi-hole command just to show all the commands that are possible with it. One that I find useful that isn't in the, or maybe not useful but interesting, that isn't in the web interface is chronometer. So if you run -c, it gives you a little interface here that if you have a small display hooked up to your Pi, you can have this running on it as kind of a quick reference point for how your Pi-hole is doing and the kind of top stats of it, if that's something that suits your fancy. Other than that, and then you can uninstall Pi-hole here, disable, restart DNS, and you can even, what's not really listed here, but if you want to, you can go to that Pi-hole, that directory that you save that install script in, and run that install script again. If anything got misconfigured in your setup, you can do that from here and restart your Pi in that sort of sense. That does it for me for this video and showing you how to install Pi-hole. I hope you found it all pretty interesting, and maybe it'll help you guys if you decide to install this on your network. I find Pi-hole to be a very interesting piece of software. It's pretty easy to set up, and it serves a lot more function than just an ad blocker like I showed. You can set up as your DHCP server. It can also not even be a blocker service. It can just be a DNS monitor, so you can kind of view all your traffic on your network and maybe be able to hunt down anything malicious going on in that sense. There's lots of different things you can do with the Pi-hole. You can integrate it even like with a VPN and be able to access your Pi-hole's ad blocking capabilities from anywhere in the world. Really, the world is your oyster with Pi-hole. It's a very simple program to install, and I find it very interesting and a very cool software to show off, and I'm really glad I got to show this off to you guys today. Thank you.